In today's episode of the Back in Shape podcast, we're going to be talking about the role of posture in preventing and alleviating your lower back pain, how it's going to play into any injuries and even before we have injuries, and really dispel this myth that seems to be perpetuated recently about posture not having any influence on back pain or anything like that. Ultimately, we even had a member share in our group something they saw on TV where the person on there basically made the bold statement, say, oh, bad posture doesn't cause back pain, do this, that, the other. And fundamentally, that leads to a lot of confusion. And when there's not the opportunity, perhaps, to explain what you're saying and maybe add a bit of context to that statement because maybe it's partially true but mostly false, you lose people because people instinctively know, of course, posture has an impact on my lower back health, on my body in general. So hopefully this article is going to really help you with that. This podcast is really going to help you with that. And on the topic of articles, this is released in addition to a nearly 3,000 word article that's going to go through this in a little bit more detail. So if there's anything else you want to understand, know that there is a lot behind this particular episode of the Back in Shape podcast, and even more on the membership site and on the website in general in other episodes of the podcast too. So we're going to try and be as helpful as possible in making you understand why maybe some of that's said, but also more importantly, why your posture does have an impact on your lower back pain. And it's one of those low-hanging fruit that you can just check off, improving your posture to make a real difference. So with that out of the way, let's start off with identifying what would be a good posture. Now, first and foremost, we've got kind of three main centers of mass in the body. We've got our head, which is a big weight. We've got our shoulders and rib cage. And then we've also got our pelvic girdle where the strong lower body muscles attach into. And those three centers of mass should be above the feet, and they should be all stacked on top of one another. Think of a Jenga tower. It wants to be in alignment, and that is the most efficient manner. If we take a step deeper, because you can identify that first step, you can see very clearly if your head is over your shoulders or if it's shunted off to one side or forwards or backwards. But if we take a deeper look, we have the head, and then we have a smooth backward bending curve in the neck with the top of the curve over the bottom. And that allows for a bit of suspension in the neck and allows for balance and all of the muscles to be structured in a way that is the human body is designed to be, and for them to work optimally, efficiently, and make use of that backward bending curve to support the strut, so to speak. Then in the rib cage, we've obviously got the rib cage itself, and we've got the thoracic spine that should have a smooth forward bending curve through it. Often people get confused here and they think of kyphosis being a bad thing, but kyphosis in the mid back only refers to the forward bending position of that spine. If we thought of the vertebral units stacked on top of one another, they would be in line. If they were in a perfect straight line, that would be quote unquote normal, and then, or neutral, so to speak, not normal, because our spine shouldn't be stacked on top of one another in a straight line. And then anything that bends forwards of that straight line would be a kyphosis, and anything backwards would be a lordosis. In the human body, we should have a natural lordosis in the neck, a natural kyphosis in the middle back, and a natural lordosis in the lower back, the sacrum, the tailbone, bending forwards again in a kyphotic shape. But those natural curves are considered the neutral. So if your mid back, for example, is curved more, that would be hyperkyphotic, so it'd be rounded more, and that's inefficient. That has mechanical consequences, stress consequences, may be associated with bad posture. Quite equally, if your middle back is too flat, that's extension or relative extension. And we see the same thing down in the lower back. If our lower back is too flat, it's going to be flexed. And if our lower back is more curved than it needs to be, then that is going to be extended. So as we go from the rib cage down into the lower back, we've got that smooth backward bending curve, slightly different to the neck, but we won't get into the details here. But that lower back curve curves backwards, and then we meet the pelvic girdle. So those three centers of mass with the curves of the spine providing that central supporting strut mean that the centers of mass are stacked on top of one another, but we have that curved shape in the various areas of the spine to provide support and suspension and allow the muscles and the ligament structures to support that spine optimally in that standing position. We have to first start by understanding that that is the most efficient way for us to weight bear. Any deviation away from that position, forwards, backwards, left, right, is going to increase mechanical strain. To the contrary, if we were in a bad position, say our head was pushed forwards, if we bring it back into a proper alignment, that is going to decrease mechanical strain. And for the purposes of this, and for the purposes of the article that you might go on to read after this, understand that, especially to please the there is no bad posture crowd, The phrase bad posture for these purposes just refers to a posture that exerts more mechanical load. If we think about it, we use bad postures all the time. We use a bad posture or an inefficient posture whilst we're doing exercises. We might, for example, do a hip hinge where we support our spine appropriately with good posture in that regard, but we pivot forwards and therefore our head is way forwards of our lower back. Our rib cage is significantly forward of our lower back, and that exerts an increase in mechanical strain on the human body. It's done in a purposeful, targeted manner to elicit a response, a training response in the body, because we know for a fact that when we move into that position, we are increasing mechanical strain on the body. Thinking right now we're a healthy body, we don't have any injuries. So we can understand that that is the case. But with bad posture, it's not quite that overt, or at least I hope it's not. We have smaller deviations from the normal. The head's a little bit forwards, or the mid-rib cage is a little bit backwards, or the pelvis is a little bit in one way or the other. And all of these things add up. Now, if we take something that's relatively small, say your phone that you might be watching on this, or your tablet, or whatever device you're using, now just hold it in front of your head for the rest of this, and maybe when you go and read the article afterwards, hold it in front of your face like so, rather than resting it on the table or on your lap, and just see how that small weight of the phone or whatever it may be starts to add up. And the problem with posture is that it's there all the time and it's subconscious. It starts to become a habit. We're not aware of it. It's a small increase in mechanical load all the time for hours on end. You're maybe just going to hold your phone up for the next 5-10 minutes while you're watching this, not 5-10 hours while you're at work all day or while you're out with friends, standing in those bad postures with those small increases in load over time. But the thing is, still talking about the healthy individual, that this is where there's an element of truth to the statement there's kind of no bad postures, is that a bad posture done without injury for a long period of time, we're talking about years, will inevitably lead to certain muscles will strengthen, certain ligaments will stiffen up, and the body starts to kind of solidify around that bad posture. So the person becomes more effective at dealing with higher loads from a constant basis or on an ongoing basis, day in, day out. Their body kind of stiffens up to support that bad posture and the increasing forces that go through the system. But that means the whole system is under more load on a daily basis. And the problem arises that that person might not have any pain, but when they do inevitably have an injury, because at the end of the day, we don't live in test tubes, injuries happen, things happen, we hurt ourselves in some way. That person now is playing with more forces. They're playing habitually with more forces. What's even worse is that if they were to get some sort of injury, like a herniated disc or sciatica or just general back pain, a back injury, giving them that lower back discomfort, what's happened now is that whole system has been under more tension, maybe for 10 years. The person doesn't even think about the fact that they have bad posture. It's just the way they stand, which means that now we have an injury. An injury means that now all of a sudden in that continuous chain of their biomechanics, that area at the L5S1 or the L45 where we've got an injury now is a weak point. Everything before was nice and tense, nice and strong, nice and taut. We had certain areas of stiffness to help support this bad posture and make it more effortless, for example. But now there's a kink in the armor and we have very strong muscles, maybe not associated, or very stiff muscles, maybe not associated at the level of the L45. Maybe it's in the glutes, maybe it's in the hamstrings, maybe it's higher up. But those stiffnesses and strengths and rigidities now pull on an area that now wobbles a lot more, like a weak link in the chain. And now you're walking around every single day with increased forces and a degree of instability, because whenever we have an injury, there's an element of instability there, because by definition, the structures that provide stability to that region have failed. And therefore there is that freedom of movement, obviously pathological, problematic, to happen. Let's say it's an L45. We've bulged the disc. We've got some ligament damage. There's other sort of damage to the capsule of the facet joints, etc. Now that shears around a little bit more because it's not functioning properly. And now we have strong muscles down at the bottom, let's say, in the glutes, or stiff muscles in the hamstrings that are pulling on that area, pulling it around while it's trying to heal while you're moving on a daily basis. Not to mention the fact that because we stand forwards, we now have more pressure going through that disc every single day. So the argument that you don't need good posture is it's nonsensical, because at the point where you have that injury, we have a load-bearing structure. A load-bearing structure in the back has been injured. To willingly or ignorantly persist with bad posture, i.e. putting more load through that injured structure, only serves to get in the way of the healing process. It's a no-brainer. Sure, we can't and wouldn't want to take that lower back and put it on a test tube and do nothing, do bed rest. We know how bad that is, muscle wastage, etc. But we don't want to put unnecessary forces. We wouldn't ever dream of saying, do you know what, you've got a bad back. Go and carry something. Just carry it all the time. Put a rucksack on and walk around for the rest of the day or the rest of the week. You wouldn't do that. You say, why would I carry more when I've got a bad back? I take the weight off. Well, why would you stand in posture just to be pig-headed because someone's told you, and this isn't you, this is someone's told you to be pig-headed and just carry on with your bad posture because it doesn't matter? It does, and people instinctively know that. You instinctively know that when you hear these silly statements of people saying bad posture doesn't matter. Hopefully you understand at least now that bad posture can be adapted for, just like any training stimuli, which means that the person is more efficient at maintaining a bad posture. But when we have injuries, postures matter. Postures affect the mechanics, the forces that go through our spine. And therefore, to have a better posture is to have less unnecessary challenges to recover from that herniated disc, sciatica, or back pain. If you've got those sorts of conditions, they're bad enough. You don't need to be making life more difficult for yourself by having a bad posture. And the secondary problem, which is more hidden from the individual suffering, is that bad posture is something that is in the background. We're not aware of it. We don't know. We don't think about it. And even if we do think about it, we're so habitualized to the way in which we have used our body on a daily basis for so many years that we think, oh, I'll sit up straight, I'll hold my body better. Oh, that feels good. And then you get tired because you're not maybe used to holding that position. And then you forget about it. You get engrossed in your work and you're back into a bad posture, slumped over again. And all of a sudden those forces come back in. The big problem with bad posture is that it is so subconscious that you continually find yourself in that position. And we see in the cases of chronic and long-standing herniated discs, bulging discs, sciatica, what you name it, the back injury, even in the middle back, etc., is that it happens so consistently through the day. Even when you try and change things, you do it for a short period. And then we wonder why we have these relapses. People get very disheartened. They're like, I keep on having these relapses, these stupid things. I'm not even doing anything, but my back keeps flaring up every day, every week. And I'm not even doing anything. No, you are. You're not aware of the fact that you're constantly putting that back on tender hooks because your posture is bad. It's just increasing the mechanical strain. When you do anything, that bad posture seeps in to make things a little bit less in your favor. So the activities of daily living just become opportunities for relapse and flare. Yes, if you had good posture, you could still have problems, but you're stacking the odds in your favor when you improve your posture. And if you don't have back pain, it's much easier to start to change this and improve your posture, because the reality of it is that changing posture takes effort. If any number of you sat in a room with your work colleagues or at home around the dinner table this Easter, and each person to the person copies the person to their left's posture and sits like that for the entirety of dinner or for the entirety of the work meeting, all of you will be uncomfortable straight away because you've made the adaptations for your bad posture. You've got John down the end who sits perfectly and he tries to adopt someone's bad posture. He's in pain. You've got Sarah to the left of him, she tries to copy his good posture. She's in pain. Why? Because we're using muscles in different ways. We're developing different strengths and rigidities and maybe restoring some when we sit in a good posture. So if you were to sit well for an extended period, you would be uncomfortable when you first do that. But as you get better at it, as you condition yourself, as you spend the next 10 years working on being a bit more conscientious, it's such a small effort, you will start to find that your natural posture improves. And therefore, if you are unlucky enough to get into a bit of trouble, get some back pain, have an injury, slip, etc., you've got a better posture so that the injury isn't having to negotiate the injury itself and more mechanical strain. The injury to the back just has to focus on getting better and doing all the other things. Because changing your posture when you don't have pain is much, much easier than changing your posture when you have an injury. So all in all, hopefully this has given you a better understanding. Posture is just a way of having more or less mechanical efficiency through the human body. It makes sense to align things in an optimal way that puts the least mechanical or least unnecessary mechanical strain through the human body. So having a good vertically aligned posture is going to always outweigh having a bad posture. And if you have a bad posture, you've probably adapted to it. So you'll get away with things. And that person that seems to always be getting away with a terrible posture and has no back pain, but you have back pain, they're getting away with it. But eventually it will catch up on you. If there's one thing you can do, it's make a step now to start to improve your posture wherever you are in that injury or non-injury cycle. Improve your posture because it decreases the unnecessary load and it starts to create good habits which will support you if you are unlucky enough to have a relapse or have an injury in your lower back. It means it's just one of those things that isn't working against you. For some people, we do have the odds stacked against us. We have maybe some degenerative change. We have maybe some other injuries that have happened in the past through no fault of our own. And now we have a back injury again. Maybe it's a bulging disc at L4-5 or whatever it could be, or some sciatica. We don't need to have unnecessary things working against us. Make the commitment to work on the muscles of the posture from basically the base of the skull all the way down, improve their strength, if you're someone who's perhaps not done enough in the way of resistance-based exercises before. And you can always read more about how to do that as part of the Back in Shape program. Have a look, if you're someone that's interested in this, at the full article that we've written, because there's tons of extra information in there that'll help you, give you some more practical tips to move forwards. But the big purpose, the big reason I wanted to do this podcast was to just make you think and offer a counter argument to the silly statement that posture doesn't matter and bad posture doesn't cause back pain. Hopefully I've done a good job there. If there's anything that's you're unsure of, if there's any questions that have arisen through this podcast, then post those in the comments below. We read and reply to all of your comments. Again, hopefully this was a thought-provoking one. Makes you feel a bit more confident that you are doing the right thing. You know what to do anyway. You know having better posture is going to be a better thing for you, and being pig-headed and having bad posture just because someone's been on the TV and said it in a rather silly way. Not to say that you're being like that, but those sorts of people saying those things, it's just unnecessary and it's not particularly helpful. You probably know anyway not to have bad posture. So make a commitment to do that. Hopefully this has helped you understand why, and we will see you in the next episode of the Back in Shape podcast.